Hello everyone and welcome back to the world's easiest Balsamiq crash course. In this video we're going to cover everything you need to know about Balsamiq, which is one of the best wireframing softwares out there right now in the market. Now you might be asking yourself, what the hell is wireframing and why am I supposed to care about this? Well, when it comes to UI UX design, one of the first steps is creating a wireframe, which is the blueprint of the entirety of your user experience, and it is the important first step in creating your user flows, figuring out how things will work, where things will go, what the basic structure is going to look like. And then when you have a wireframe built, when the user flow is finalized, now you can start experimenting with the user interface and the final user experience. So that is what wireframing is. Wireframing is the very first step in any new software design, and Balsamiq is one of the best softwares in the market to get started with wireframing. It is extremely simple for beginners, and this is the world's easiest crash course on Balsamiq. So let's just get started. Alright, so we're just going to log in, and that is going to get us started in the world of Balsamiq. The very first thing you absolutely need to know about this is Balsamiq works in terms of spaces, so you can create a new space if you'd like. I'm creating a space called new, and with that we are getting started. Alright, the best part about Balsamiq as a software is sometimes beginners don't know what the elements of wireframes are supposed to be, and that gets extremely confusing, especially if you are just very new and getting started. The best part about Balsamiq is, even before you think about what this software does, even before you think about what wireframing is, you can see in the first glances what the essential elements of wireframes are supposed to be. Since all that Balsamiq does is create wireframes, it's extremely specific and extremely niche and extremely good at telling you what wireframing elements need to be present in designing any new UI. So let's just talk about all of the elements that you would use in any new wireframe that Balsamiq automatically gives you. So the basic building blocks of any wireframe include a rectangle, which is a simple box, and you can basically use this to signify anything, and we'll talk about specifics in just a bit. You can enter any new shape as well. The interesting part about Balsamiq is it is just a simple drag and drop kind of user interface, which is just extremely easy when you're trying to getting all of your ideas out from your brain to the screen and just getting a sense of what the initial user flow is going to be like. Again, this shape is very changeable, so you can kind of change it to be whatever you'd want it to be. These are all different elements that you would need to create any wireframe. For example, an accordion, which is a list of different items, which is used for frequently asked questions and lists of important things in any user wireframe. Or the cover flow, which is going to be the main cover screen and also the other flow screens of whatever interface you're designing. You can also get for yourself a browser window, which kind of shows you what web page you'd show as an embed over here, and this kind of gives you a very basic understanding of what things are going to look like. You can even change this URL to match whatever your user interface is. So if you're designing this for the client side, you're going to enter their name right here, and this gives just things a more professional, personalized experience when you're trying to show these user flows to someone else later on. You can have horizontal lines, which are just rulers that can go from here, and you can link them to the entirety of the box or a part of the box. So for example, if there was an important button over here inside of this page, you could easily put that over here, and these rulers would help you figure out, link this button to something outside, and that would clarify that you're talking about this button when you make this line and not the entirety of this page. So that's kind of a good specification to have when you're using these lines to point to something important, and then maybe add some text over here as a note for this button and not the entirety of this UI. So very clear labeling is the very first part of wireframing. Vertical rule is the exact same thing but done in a vertical line. So if you wanted to point out something that you had done, for example, let's say you had a button bar this time and you wanted to point out something on this button bar, you could use this vertical rule. There is absolutely no difference between a horizontal and a vertical rule in functionality. It's just one of them is standing, one of them is kind of lying down, and you can have some text or an entire text paragraph that describes whatever it is that you want to describe. And the interesting part with text is you can have a paragraph of text, an unassigned link, a second row of text, and this text kind of gives you an example of everything that you could do. And the way they're doing this is giving you a basic idea of how to put in and frame these elements if you'd want to. So this is the basic markdown that went into making something like this happen. But if you want to change some of the text, you can do that as well. So you can add and change the formatting of the text by itself from right here on the right sidebar. But we're going to get into text formatting in just a bit. As you were talking about these elements, one of the things that you just can't forget is arrows, which are very specific, and they exactly point to the thing they need to point out. So arrows are a little bit more clear and more specific when you're trying to point something out, share something extremely specific, and you can kind of have a title over here and just have things be extremely specific in terms of where you're pointing them. So they're just one step above in terms of clear labeling when it comes to the chain of ruler lines and arrows and stuff you'd use to point stuff you'd use to label elements on your wireframe. Again, as we talked about, you can have some text, a text paragraph, or a big title. We've covered all three of these right here. You can also have a text subtitle, which is a little bit smaller and acts as a detailed description of whatever the main title is. You can have some squiggly text, which basically, when entered over here, describes where text information would be put. So this isn't functionally telling us some information right now when we're wireframing it, but it is extremely important because sometimes you're designing something and you want to know what it would look like if the text was put on one corner, what things would look like if text was the main central element and all of these other things were just removed or put on the side. So I think this is a very good way of being able to experiment around and find out what things would look like if you had some text go on, or the majority of the text go on in one or the other of these corners. So I'm just going to get rid of these, and with this you can get a very, very practical mock-up of what things would look like if you added a small description line, a large description line. I find myself using this all the time because sometimes when you're getting started with a new project, all you get in step 1 of any user experience is this is the basic client's description. They don't always give you the exact copy they're going to use for the final site, and that can be put in terms of these placeholders and give a very, very clear visual description of what things would look like, and then the client or whoever the site is owned by can basically change things to be whatever they'd want it to be. And you can double click this, and the good thing with this is you can double click this to make this description text, which happens automatically. I'm not doing anything. So this is plain squiggly text, and you can get any squiggly text you'd want. Double click and it would change to actual text. So when the client actually gives you some actual text, you can change it into actual text and then format it exactly like they're formatting this, all of this right here. We talked about buttons. We talked about a button bar. You can choose to link these to specific places. You can link this to a web address, for example, google.com or any site you'd want to link it to. You can have it be linked to a new wireframe. Let's call the first wireframe wireframe 1, call the second one wireframe 2, and you can link this button to the second wireframe. You can have Alt plus click to open our second wireframe right here, and we were not done talking about the third one. You can also link it to a duplicate of this exact wireframe. I think this is kind of nice when you're trying to copy this exact wireframe but show minor differences. So for example, if I was exactly happy with this but I wanted to show some minor differences, for example, I don't want this button to be there, you could kind of show that version around. So I'm just going to get rid of this, delete entirely, and now you can kind of toggle back and forth very, very quickly between seeing a version of this wireframe where button exists and seeing a version of this wireframe where you don't have that button. So this is very useful when the client or you aren't entirely sure if a button serves an important enough purpose to be put on the first page in the first place. Some buttons are sometimes optional, or sometimes it's a situation is such that you don't entirely want, you're not entirely thinking about the buttons every single time you move around. Sometimes you want to provide a little bit of clarity in your UI design, and sometimes it makes sense to get rid of some buttons. It's smart removal. It's a smart placement of choices wherever you'd want things to be. And so having an actual option where you can instantly click and see what things would look like on this exact wireframe, just a little bit different, helps you be very, very clear and conscious and be able to physically compare these changes. So I think that's exactly where the third button is very, very helpful. You can choose a standard selection. So that means you can choose if the main selection is going to be the first one, the second one, or the third one automatically. And that's exactly where this blue outline is going to be. You can change this text to be bold, italicized, or underlined. You can change the font size if you'd want to, making this entire thing bigger. Add a little bit of padding, change the shapes to be whatever you'd want them to be. Auto size it so that things are automatically fitting perfectly. Change the widths and the heights. So example, if I wanted to do a 333 pixels, it would just do it automatically and make sure this and this have exactly the same width and height. I think the instant, quick and easy way of building wireframes and just adapting to the wireframing process is exactly why I would pick Balsamiq over Figma, because sometimes when you're doing this with Figma, you're not entirely sure how you would make sure every single time you update the width of a major container, all of the elements scale gracefully without applying a bunch of auto layouts and fancy things and just racking your brains while trying to do something simple, something as simple as planning a simple wireframe. So if that makes sense. You can talk about layering when you have two or more elements on the same exact place. So this puts your current selection at the top of everything else. This brings it one line behind, and this brings it to the back of absolutely everything else, including this actual wireframe. And if I wanted to send this wireframe back and send everything else in the front, I could do that as well. Alright, I think one of the best parts with this is you get to see these purple bars which let you align every single element equally, which becomes a very important thing when you have a bunch of stuff and when you want very, very clear, clean looking wireframes, very, very professional looking designs. You can't have 2 or 3 different elements that kind of are offset by a couple of pixels and have it look professional and have it look be really, really cool and fancy. So I think the most important part when you're just getting started is make sure everything aligns perfectly no matter where it is, and these purple liners let you do that automatically. Alright, you can also insert a link if you'd want to, so you can link this directly to home page if you'd want to, and this is just very, very clear description of what that's going to look like. You can insert a menu bar, so instead of having one single thing here, you can have the entirety of the menu at the top. You can have text input which asks the user what text they'd like to enter, so they could have information like their age or their name or anything else you'd want to enter right here, and the user kind of has to enter some text. This is text area where you'd want user to put in major information, so for example put in your message, and this is exactly where they'd put in their message. This and this are not places where you would put a lot of text that you're telling the user. These are places where you would ask the user to give you their input. These are form elements. So this is a form element to get the user's text input, and this is a form text area to get the user's text in standard wireframing. This is a search box. You can search for whatever you'd want to, wherever you'd want to. You can change the basic text that comes. So for example, find plants if you're searching for plants, and this is a site that indexes those plants, sells those plants, and things like that. Again, you can change the width and height of any actual text box if you'd want to. This is a checkbox, and you can kind of check in or out and change its state. So this is something where you could check, are you a vegan? And these are just very, very basic form elements that you would want to have at your service when you're designing an actual wireframe. And there can be a bunch of states that any actual form element can be at. So this, even this, and this are all elements of a form, meaning you would want the user to be able to put in their data or just do something with these. And I think this can even be used as a search object, but for the most part, this, and this are form elements. So let's just kind of categorize them as form elements. You could have form elements, enter your details. This text is not useful for the user to interact with. This text is only for the user's understanding, and this part of the text is for the user to be able to put something inside of it. So that's kind of the difference. When you have something where you're guiding the user inside of a form, those things are called labels, and when you have a box or text where the user needs to type in more stuff, that's called an input. This is a label, this is an input, and those are the basic differences when you're categorizing the 2 different form elements. Anyways, talking about checkboxes, sometimes you have different states of checkboxes, or any element for that matter. So sometimes the state is normal and the user can interact with something normally. Sometimes the state is select in live action. Sometimes the state is disabled, meaning for some reason, especially if earlier in the form they've already said that they're non-vegetarian, then the whole option of are you vegan is kind of irrelevant, and that's when you would automatically want this entire option disabled. You can have disabled and selected, meaning if they'd already selected that they were vegans before, and now you have the ability to automatically select the option of vegetarian, which, wow, I can't spell anymore, and which is a weird Venn diagram if you think about it. So what I'm trying to talk about over here is, in the whole debate of vegetarians and vegans, you have vegetarians. And let's make this even smaller. Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste this a bunch of times. Non-vegetarians. And we're going to reduce the opacity because we're trying to make a Venn diagram at this point. Some people are going to be both. Hear me out a little bit. We're going to use a vertical rule to kind of point out to whatever I want to point out to right now. These are both. So you could call them omnivores. But also, when you think about the whole concept of vegans, one thing we are sure of is absolutely no vegan is ever going to be a non-vegetarian, and that's what I'm talking about. So now in this form example, let's say we had a combo box and it had a bunch of choices for the user to choose from. So they could choose if they're vegans, if they're non-vegetarians, if they're omnivores, and let's say for some reason, even though I know the order is kind of random, you had vegetarians and all of these were in kind of our list, and this checkbox was for some reason already present even before we started talking about this. Now one thing you can be sure of is if the user has already selected vegans, now the fact that they're a vegetarian is automatically implied. So not only is this disabled because you've kind of already shown us what your choice is, it it is also selected because this is automatically true because you've already chosen that you're a vegan. You can also add images to your actual wireframes. Show the user where you'd put an image inside here. Make this smaller, enter it right here. Again, I would love to put in a little logo image if I could, and this is a very, very good description of that. And I think wireframes are extremely important because you don't yet know what the exact logo is going to be. Sometimes the images aren't given to you immediately. Sometimes you're trying to plan something. Sometimes you're trying to make a more generalized design, and these X'd out boxes let you see what that would look like for the entirety of the user flow, no matter what the exact logo image is. You can also use this image for describing something right here. So you can put an image, which always is important for our site for some reason. And I know this looks like a weird 2012-ish UI, but right now we're trying to figure out all of the elements that you can and must use while making a wireframe. You can also import icons. Choose for an icon. Let's choose for help. And this icon feature is one of my favorites in Balsamiq because it comes automatically built in with an icon library, and you can choose which icon you'd want. So if I want a help icon, I can automatically browse and search for the icon that suits my needs the best. So for example, if I'm trying to describe something, so this is the question icon, and you can put this in here so the users can ask a question by clicking on it, reach out for help if they want it, and you can visually see what that would look like in this context as well. You can also have a list. This is a very, very simple list. It's not complicated. It doesn't have a lot you need to think about. It just has a bunch of items that you can kind of list out, visually see everything that you'd want to see. Item 4, and you can add to this list, make it as long as you'd want. Every single time you want to add a new element, just press shift and enter and reach a new line, and you can enter whatever element you'd want to. I think this also works in a similar way. You just have to press shift and enter, and you can add as many elements as you'd want to in this combo box as well. And you can choose the way your scroll bar is going to be in terms of the scroll bar placement right here. This is a data grid. This is a little bit more fancy than the normal grid, which is going to get this out because it's kind of huge. It's kind of like having a simple table inside of your wireframe, and this is kind of the way you would format it entirely. So if we just zoom in right here, this is them kind of putting all of this stuff right here. Again, all of these tags, all of these title tags, this entire markdown is kind of unique to Balsamiq, and you can click on the Balsamiq markdown video right here at the top to see the world's easiest guide on how to use your own markdown, type stuff out so that your basics typed information can kind of fit itself in a really, really nice looking table like this. I think the main thing to keep in mind here is whenever they use \r, that basically means we're kind of adding a new line, and this can also happen when you're in the middle of writing stuff. So if I'm saying type 1 and then I do /r, then I'm kind of entirely adding a new line over here. And if I change the lines and then do a \r, then I'm adding 2 extra lines wherever I'm making space. So that's kind of the basic thing that you need to keep in mind. Every single time you add a comma, you're trying to go to the next column. So let's just say 34 for some reason, and then every single time you add another comma, you're going to the next column. And that's kind of the way this works. Again, click on the entire Balsamiq markdown video right here to get the world's easiest guide on how to actually use this markdown in practical purposes, how to create checkboxes and all of these different states inside of your Balsamiq markdown. And also because if you don't learn the basic markdown of Balsamiq, it becomes really, really hard to select a very small amount of text, make it bold automatically. So when you're using these buttons, they kind of just either bold the whole thing out or just don't bold anything at all. And so this specific markdown, to figure out how you would format this on your own without getting lost in the little text editing states and without having to import 1,000 different checkboxes, some bolded, some not bolded, just to put in one simple piece of text, how to do this natively and automatically. This also applies to this as well. The final element that I want to talk about is a comment. So you can add any comment you'd like, incredible work, or just describe what you'd want to describe, and you can choose the color of your comment. So you can kind of change these colors. This is so fun. You can use the eyedropper tool to select any color that you would want specifically. Again, change the text to be bold, italicized, or underlined, change the text alignment, change the font size, change the X or Y axis values. So we could just do 600 and this would automatically be placed here. Even when you drag and drop something, the X axis and Y axis values change automatically. You can change the numbers to change the width and height, or you can do this with your cursor and that also changes the width and height. Layer it, and that's pretty much it for the entirety of this. Again, the thing to remember here is this is not the entirety of every single element you would ever use while making a wireframe. And now you might be wondering, well, what is the entirety? Where is the entirety entirety of that list. As soon as you drag a shape inside of here, this is a simple ellipse we're using, you can transform it to be any of these elements, and all of these, and I would encourage you to go through that list on your own, are different elements that you practically use while making real UI designs. Wireframes, for example, a radio button, which is a rounded button with a dot in the middle, or a combo box, which we just saw, which is a huge list of elements from which you choose the one you like. So let's say we have one more element, and you can just choose the main one you'd want from this list. And I know we've discussed the main ones over here, but there are a couple of elements that are really, really specific and that you'd want to check out if you want to get the entire feel of every single element that comes with making these. The thing that we're talking about right now is an iOS picker, and these are very, very specifically from the land of iOS, and they're kind of scrolly wheels, and they let you choose the element that's kind of right here in the middle. So it's kind of a real circle with all of the elements going around in a cylinder structure, if that makes sense, and you can kind of scroll up and down to make sure the number or the thing that you'd want is right here in the middle of these lines, and that is an iOS picker. You can choose a field set, which is just a simple set of every single property we have right here, and this is a field where the user can enter whatever they want to enter. These are vertical tabs, so you can create one or more tabs by making sure every single element that you want for the next tab goes to the next line, and these are 4 different tabs. The first tab is going to show this content, the second is going to show content, again replaced over here. You can choose which tab you'd like to be selected at this time. So right now the selection is none. You can choose the first element, the second element, whichever you choose. This is now selected, and this is the content that is being shown inside of the actual place where the contents of the tab actually go. So that's kind of how vertical tabs work, and you can experiment around with all of these to see what they do. You can have a sitemap too. Again, my homework to you is go check out what a sitemap is and how you can use that in a real life wireframe. With that said, the things that we discussed up until this point are the things that make a wireframe a wireframe. These are the elements of a wireframe. Any practical wireframe requires these elements to be there for it to be called a wireframe. That is not the entirety of Balsamiq though. So all of these are just the things that make up a wireframe. Balsamiq as a software is much more complex, so we're just going to discuss that complexity now. The first thing that you need to know is this area is again kind of tabbed, which we just talked about, lets you see all of the different wireframes that you have in either this standard platform or in a listed platform. You can also click on plus to create a new wireframe right here. You can go up and down using these buttons, or you can click these automatically to go up and down. You can use this button to go undo or redo a specific action you did. You can choose music from right here. Background music helps a lot of people focus, and it's kind of incredible to have if you want it to be there and you want to focus with it. This is the basic bottom bar, which is also present in Figma. So if you're coming from the land of Figma in UI UX design, this is going to be extremely native to you. You can add text from right here. Let's just do text, more text. You can have a simple rectangle, change the shape to be whatever you'd want it to be, let it be a button or anything else. You can put in a simple image. So this crossed out rectangle is basically an image, and you can change what it is for as long as you'd want. You can have it be an icon and then maybe give the icon some kind of an actual icon from their library. Change the size of the icon itself, link it to a specific place, change the color of the icon, give it a border, remove the border, or just do any of these other elements. You can have a simple arrow be there, and arrows are really important because oftentimes when you're wireframing stuff, it's just really important to be able to really quickly use something or the other which points to something or the other. Wireframing is basically creating user flows, and sometimes flows go from one thing to the other thing, and then something connects to a different thing, and so arrows are just extremely practical and helpful. You can also add comments. So if this was entirely done, I could add a comment that said nice, or whatever improvements would needed to be made. So if something was wrong, I'd say wrong thing and then enter a detailed description of whatever went wrong. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing how bad I am at spelling stuff when I'm talking simultaneously. I can add this comment, and again, you can like it, resolve it entirely, and while you're making comments, you can choose which direction this is going to be angled at. You can also choose the color of the comment itself in case you want to differentiate. So for example, when I'm doing compliments or comments relating to, let's say, the dark mode, then this dark mode flows well here is going to be required. And I think when I'm commenting on something completely different, for example, form setup looks good, then it kind of makes sense to have 2 different colors. So for example, if I'm having multiple issues or comments with the dark mode, then I can kind of do the same exact color and talk more about dark mode further, whatever it is that I want to talk about. And having the same exact color in practicality lets you consistently go and resolve all of the issues that come with this specific feature, work on it at once, and then maybe change it. It is also kind of helpful when you're having more than one person over here. So when you have two different people, it kind of makes sense to want to review only one person's comment at a time, and having different colors kind of helps you do that. Just go person by person and be able to check what their different comments say. You can also mark a comment as unread. So for example, if you already read it, you can still mark it as unread because you kind of still want to work on it. You can edit that comment if it is your own comment, change it further, or delete it from the user's side entirely. So this is kind of different than resolving. Resolving is saying that this entire issue has been fixed from the person who is responsible for fixing it, and deleting a comment is done from the person who has created it, who's just taking their words back at this point. So these are words, this is the user, and I want to take it back on my own, I can delete it. If I'm the person who's supposed to fix it and I've already done that, I can resolve it. If I'm the person who is a tester or someone who is neither the person who can resolve it or the person who has made the comment, I can like it to show support to whatever this comment is. And that's kind of the way comments work inside of Balsamiq. The right toolbar is kind of really effective because you can choose every single specific detail for any element at all that you have chosen. And this is kind of like Figma. You can choose what shape you're using, the XY axis values, width and height, whether they're layered at the top, at the bottom, whether an element has a border, doesn't have a border, what color an element is, what icon it's going to have. You can choose for it to have no icons at all, or you can give it a specific icon. So for example, I can have a table icon, or I can have this icon be rotated by 90 degrees. I can remove the icon entirely or open the entire icon library from Font Awesome icons and choose whatever icon I'd want. I can change the size of the icons. Let's just do a dice, or search for something that I want to search. So for example, if I search for a sword, I'm going to find all of the different sword icons inside of the Font Awesome icon library. I can select a specific icon, put it right here, change the label position. So for example, you can label this to the bottom, label this to the right, label this to the left. So if I say text now, this text, which is the label right now, is going to go to the bottom, this is going to go to the left, this is going to go to the right, and kind of be able to tell us where text is going to go in relation to the icon. If you just look really carefully, you'll be able to see these three work their magic in whatever direction you would want. You can also link this to a different place. Let's just link this to a web address. Let's just do google.com. Okay, and you can just click on this, do alt and click to be able to open this entire icon and go to Google. Where we're going to go back, you can change the state to be normal selected, which means I'm currently selecting it, and that's kind of what it looks like. You can have it be focused, meaning that this is exactly what's selected. So the blue outline is also there, but also the user is pressing on it. This is the extremely focused active state, and this can be disabled, meaning that it's not applicable in current contexts. It is useful for some contexts, but not right now. You can make the text be bold, you can make it italicized, underlined, change the font size to be whatever you would want it to be, and that's kind of the way the right sidebar takes any element at all, not just this circle button, but any element at all, and now you're able to choose specific elements and details and just be able to resolve them automatically. Most of the times you can basically look at the name, look at the function, mess around with it, and you'll figure out what it needs to do. You don't need to read a fancy manual for this, mess around with the right toolbar a lot, try to see what all of these different things do, but you'll also be able to figure them out as you go, so don't stress it out. And that's pretty much the entirety of the work parts of Balsamiq. Again, the last thing that I want to talk about today is work parts of Balsamiq. With that said, you can check out the comments that we've made, so you can kind of just have one place where all of the active comments are, in case you wanted to like take a look at the list. If we had more than one and just resolve them one by one, you can make this whole thing zoomed in or zoomed out because there's a lot of area to cover. You can have the zoom to actual size button, which basically lets you take whatever elements there are, even if they're zoomed in a lot, and just get them back to their actual size, so you're visually able to see what's going to happen. And you can do that wherever you'd want to do. So for example, right now you're zoomed out, but this gives us the actual size of our actual screens, which is, by the way, a real size, because when you go around selecting a width and height, that means something. And when you click on this button, this gives you exactly what 316 pixels of width would look like, what 216 pixels of height would look like, and it kind of gives you an actual number, actual objective size of that pixel ratio, because pixels are actually real, even if they don't mention the word pixel specifically over here. That's kind of implied and absolute. You can zoom this to the actual width of whatever it is. So this will take up the entirety of whatever space this is. So for example, if I have a lot of content right here, I can zoom it all to fit the width of one single page and just be extremely useful when I'm trying to work with something. So you'll still be required sometimes to scroll things, but every single thing, no matter how big it is or how small it is horizontally, will be fixed so that the only thing you have to scroll is vertical. So you just have to see these elements, scroll from top to bottom. You can also click on this to zoom to fit to the window, so everything in the entirety of this page is going to fit, just so you can have one visual clear view on everything that you have on this page without having to zoom or scroll a lot to see all of the different things we've made. You can also present this for a full screen presentation in case you're in a client meeting, in case you need to share it with different people. Again, all of these instructions are extremely simple, and I think it's going to be far more useful when you're actually presenting it to someone. Again, these are extremely simple instructions, and if you want to see what presenting things looks like to an actual client, what things you need to kind of keep in mind, maybe check out this entire video on how to present wireframes to clients, and it kind of goes into details on how to use Balsamiq and these tools and features while presenting specific elements to an actual user or a client for your initial presentation. This is the help button where you can check out stuff from the Balsamiq documentation help. If you're stuck on something, you can kind of put your doubt in here and it'll give you a searched list of everything that's kind of useful to you. Again, with that said, you can also rename your project to be project 1, whatever it is that you want it to be. Now let's talk about the top bars. This is the project button. You can create a new project, go to all projects, or open a recent project, create a new wireframe, rename a wireframe. Let's just change this wireframe's name to new wireframe 32 instead of 3. How original of me. And just copy and paste these wireframes on your own. You can edit, you can use the edit option to again do copy pastes and a bunch of really small actions, specific ones. You can use the view window to view all of these, to view or hide all of these different elements. So you can kind of show the navigator, show the toolbar, show the UI library, without which you have a very, very plain window. And again, when I'm doing this stuff practically, it almost always makes sense to have at least the navigator, toolbar, and UI library all enabled. Again, up until this point, we talked about the UI controls, which were the main building blocks of any wireframe. You can also have icons if you just want to see what they are specifically and kind of scroll around, find the main ones. You can also change this to be a different kind of icon. You can get images here as well, so you can upload a specific image from your device. I'm just going to get one which is present right here. This is importing my image. I have all of my images that I've already uploaded saved right here from Balsamiq Cloud, and I'm just going to get this down right here, change the text if I want there to be some kind of label text. This button lets you convert images to wireframes. So if you have a UI screenshot, it will convert it to a real wireframe. It doesn't work with logos, photos, and non-UI contents. Since this is a non-UI content, we'll try to get a UI content for ourselves and see if this feature actually works. This is going to be interesting. Let me find a good UI. Alright, so if you're not aware, this is the UI I made in the world's easiest pen pot crash course, and I'm trying to get this UI converted into an actual wireframe. Let's just do that. Convert. If this works, I'm going to be really, really happy. Let's just see what happens. If you want to make this actual UI on your own, you can do that from the world's easiest pen pot crash course, present right here at the top. Click on this link to view the entirety of this tutorial. Check this out, you guys. I am so surprised at the fact that they've gotten this accurately close. Like, again, it is kind of taken text even from inside of the image, which is just a reminder of the remarkable accuracy of the entirety of this software for me. Again, hands down, one of the nicest things you've done. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of a chance of human error. This is a still somewhat new feature from beta. You can use these automatic lines that it shows you to kind of align things exactly where you'd want to align them. Of course, there's little things that you still need to tweak. For example, everything was right aligned at first, and of course we don't need these right here. These were just labels. Again, it just does everything, even the offsets of text that we did, even for fancy effects. So I think this is one of the coolest features of Balsamiq ever. Like, if you already have a UI that's already made and you kind of want to convert this back to the pre-UI design stage, the wireframing stage, and then change out the positioning of elements. So if I wanted to see what it would look like on if the image was aligned to this, and if the text was kind of somewhere else, and it was half at the top, half at the bottom, and I can basically take all of the elements from someone else's or my own completed UI, break it apart as a wireframe by using the entirety of this button, and kind of be able to work all of the different ways in which things would look visually if the placement of elements from the user flow was a little bit different. So this kind of lets me experiment with that hands-on. Again, if you want to make this actual UI on your own, go click on this video. This is the world's easiest penpot crash course, and in this video we make the entirety of this UI while also talking about penpot, which is an open source alternative to Figma, complete for UI UX design. And it's basically the next step you would take after designing something in Balsamiq, after creating the wireframe of something in Balsamiq, which is why it's so relevant to you guys. You can also import an image from the web, search for an image URL. So for example, if I already have the link of an image, I can just type this in here and then I can fetch it automatically, or you can click on something and sketch it from the web. You also have all of these templates, which I'm really proud of, because it just gives you such a quick path into something that you're already working on. CRM is something that I'm going to try this time, and again, you can work with all of the templates, see what happens. These templates basically let you create wireframes of what all of the different parts of any user flow would look like. So for example, this is a CRM. It has a sales dashboard, it has an orders panel, it has an inventory panel, it has a reports panel. These are all of the basic wireframe templates that you would use for any CRM. And the beauty of using something like Balsamiq is you not only get to have very specific choices in terms of the user experience, you can also take one of these templates, shift things around, see how things would work out differently if you just place things somewhere else, and it basically lets you come up with your own way of doing things. So for example, if I shifted this from here to here and then just changed things around, and if it made logical sense, I can visually see very quickly, without getting into the entirety of really specific colors and fonts and descriptions, what it would be like if the positioning of the entirety of this dashboard was a little bit different. So for example, if it was a little bit larger, smaller, if these things were kind of shifted around in different orders, all of that can be done right here. Again, if you're really impressed by a specific template, or you're actually working for some kind of client which requires you to make a CRM, you can just click on this button to add all of these as a new wireframe, and then you can kind of work on them on your own. Every single one of these pages can be given your personal attention to, and then you can just change things around to be specific to the needs of the project that you're working on. Let's just go back, and these are a bunch of really interesting templates. I do encourage you to try these out on your own, see what happens. These are very practical, especially when you're trying to make something on your own. You can type right here at the top to search for something. So for example, if I was searching for how to make a rectangle, I could just do that from right here. So let's just get a rectangle in as well. And then obviously you have the ability to change whatever tabbed layouts are present right here. So this was all of the essentials for the UI controls. This is an actual list of also every single UI design element that you could ever need is listed right here, and it kind of visually shows you what things would look like. So for example, you have a pie chart and a basic dashboard chart. All of these are very specific elements that you can kind of mess around with if you wanted to see a visual of what all of these elements look like. You have layouts right here, so a basic browser layout, a field set layout, which is a specific kind of group. You have an iPad layout, you have an iPhone layout, and these are very specific layouts when you're trying to design something for a specific screen size. A smartphone layout as well. You can add some kind of text, so these are all of the different kinds of texts you could have inside of your layout. You can add form elements, navigation options, buttons. All of these are different kinds of buttons that you would use. Display different kinds of data, popovers for descriptions, progress indicators, different things of media. So for example, you can also have a final webcam feed coming in over here, a volume changer if something is an audiobook, and you can choose something right here. You can have annotations. So for example, this is a scratch out. You can scratch it out, clarify these elements to see what kind of a thing you're going to have. This can work excellently both as a placeholder, and if you're kind of feeling creative one day and decide you want to have some kind of a scratch card thing. I think both of those are really practical, fun ways of trying to use this. This is a horizontal curly bracket, a vertical curly bracket. Both of these are descriptions. You can change these to be whatever you would want them to be. A red X to cancel something out. A tooltip to describe something really specific right here. This is very specific only to this specific checkbox and nothing else. And you have the option to add more. So this is where you see all of the different templates and libraries. Some are material design content cards, some are Doja toolkits. These are from the Bootstrap library. All of these are different standardized libraries by private holders, and you can kind of see how they fit in right here. So the Tailwind is one of my favorites. Tailwind CSS, Tailwind styling is a whole brand of kind of doing things. If you're programming something and you want the Tailwind CSS UI library, these are just really quick and easy ways. If you already know what you're going to use for your programming part of things is going to be Tailwind CSS, then this is a really easy way of getting the pre-built Tailwind cards right here and use them for wireframing instead of doing your own specific wireframes from scratch. Like, these take a little while to make, and if you use the Tailwind template, then you can basically see a quick version of what things would look like if you use Tailwind without having to make all of these on your own to mirror Tailwind. You can also do Bootstrap. Bootstrap is very popular in these contexts. It provides pre-built components, and it's just extremely fun if you want to save time on the styling parts of making any real UI. Like, this is just really fun to work with too. And I think one of the cool parts of Balsamiq is you get to get two different style libraries which are standardized, and you get to see what their successful alert looks like, compare them, and just have a lot of fun with the visuals. As always, if you like what Balsamiq does, you can subscribe. As always, you can also invite your team, all of the different people you would want there to be, add their email addresses, separating them with commas, or have Slack subscriptions. Change the roles that people have from can edit to can view and comment to cannot access project. And again, these are just going to be things you're going to find very useful when you start using something personally. You can also make the entire thing public by clicking on this little checkbox and integrate Slack and not just email addresses when you're trying to share something. This button is super cool because it kind of simplifies your UI, gets rid of the entirety of the headache and mess at the top, so you can just use this little floating slider to be able to see where you are at currently, and then show UI library with this little icon right here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has been the world's easiest Balsamiq crash course. I hope you like what we did here. I hope you like wireframing with Balsamiq. I hope you like wireframing as a whole. I hope you make a bunch of really cool UI UX designs from scratch. And there's something from this video that you found helpful that helps you do that. And with that, thank you so much for watching the entirety of this video. Consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Alright, love you, bye.